and I'll now take this addendum for this meeting of the Social Work Resources Committee of 6 March 2024. We have present Councillors Allison, Anderson. We have apologies from Councillor Bradley. We also have present Councillors Brogan, Brown, Archie Buchanan, Matthew Buchanan, Kalikis, Devlin, Donnelly. Apologies from Councillor Fagan. We have present Councillors Faulkner, Frame. Apologies from Councillor Handybode, and we have Councillor Cowie substituting. We also have present Councillors Horn, Hose, Logan, MacDonald, McClymont, Nelson, Nugent, Ross, Scott, Walker, Watson and Williams. And I'll hand back to the Chair for today's business.
Thanks, Tracy. Moving on to item 1, are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, item 2, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 12 in your pack. Could these be approved as a correct record, please? Approved. Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to monitoring items. Item 3 is the Revenue Budget Monitoring 2023 to 24 for the period 1st of April to 28th December 2023, and that's pages 13 to 20. And could I invite Graham Booth to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The purpose of the report, which is on pages 13 to 20 of your papers, is to provide information on the actual expenditure against budget for the period 1st of April to 28th of December 2023, and also to provide a forecast for the year to 31st of March 2024. Section 5.1 notes that following the Council's probable outturn exercise, the resource is reporting a break-even position. As reported to previous committees, sections 5.2 and 5.3 note that within Children and Family Services, 9.2 million of one-off funding is available to contribute towards budget pressures this financial year, and the resource is working towards managing the overall budget pressure in children and families into 2024-25. This is covered further at agenda item 8 to this committee as part of the Sustaining Social Work, Children and Family Services Budget Recovery Actions paper, which we'll touch on later on. Sections 5.4 and 5.5 outline the current position in relation to adult and older people's services. A break-even position has been reported, and included within this position is a commitment in relation to the IJB in relation to specific funding which is not anticipated to spend this financial year of 1.272 million. The Executive Committee on 24th of January approved that the IJB retains this non-recurring underspend within their reserves earmarked for future care costs. Section 5.6 notes the financial position to 28 December 2023 with the resource reporting a break-even position. Appendices A to E on pages 16 to 20 provide details on the period 10 position, and detailed variance explanations and proposed variants for each of the services are shown in appendices B to E. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. Committee is asked to note the forecast to 31st of March 2024 of a break-even position after the approved transfers to reserves, to note the break-even position as at the 28th of December, and to approve the proposed budget variants. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I have Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. It's regards to the underspend and vacancies, mainly with social workers, which in every budget monitoring report basically says in every one. I suppose the question round about it is, further on in the papers we've got the progress report. One of the progress reports was I read due to reporting to the Children's Reporter. So basically my question is round about is how that is looking on sickness. How does that affect our sickness levels? How does it affect our overtime budget? And basically the localities that this affects. Is it each locality? What locality does it really affect? That there's a large amount of vacancies lying about.
Hello, I'll respond to that just in terms of the query around the vacancies. You will know that we have been talking for a long time in terms of committee that there is a high level of vacancies, and this has been addressed through the workforce plan, and we are continuing to look at different recruitment techniques. In addition to that, there is also the revised locality design model, which is now currently being rolled out. and that will go some way to address in terms of the recruitment and retention issues across all of localities. In terms of absence rates, again, that's something that's continuing to be monitored. It's covered as part of the Workforce Monitoring Report that I'll be presenting later on, and we continue to look at that. I don't have the detail in terms of how that's broken down across localities, but happy to have a look at that and share some further information with you.
Thanks, Eileen. Did you want to come back in? Yeah.
Supplementary. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. That'd be good to see the localities of where the vacancies actually are sitting, as well, to see how that looks. Because other people may be picking up that workload that's may lead to stress and sickness, but it's overtime as well. That we must have backfill to cover some of these. I mean, if you think about 37, I think, in the workforce that we lost, so that's 37 basically workload that we have transferred to some other people. So it's to make sure that the people are getting the support in the right place at the right time. There is a high level of vacancies, but from reading this paper, is it because we're trying to save money, or is it because we can't recruit? Because it looks in the paper that the break-even position that we've got to is because of the high level of vacancies. But we can't have people picking up extra workloads because we try to save money.
Eileen, do you want to come back now?
Morning. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. So as we've reported, thank you for the question, and as we reported previously, so we are actively looking to recruit in a whole range of areas. We've talked before about this in terms of particularly respect of our professional social workers, the social worker crisis we've got in this country in terms of availability of the workforce. So that's why it is primarily difficult for us to recruit, as is the case right across Scotland. You are totally right in terms of then the implications it has for other members of those teams and other areas of the workforce, hence why the importance of us prioritising work and appropriately, and also taking forward the redesign activities that's been referred to earlier on today. As we've also though talked about in terms of how we manage the overall financial position, we have talked about the fact that because we have those difficulties in recruiting, that provides us with an opportunity to have some breathing space in terms of what we need to do in terms of the finance as we move on to coming up with more sustainable solutions. And that's why we've got the paper later on in terms of the budget recovery actions we need to take on. So just to be quite clear, we don't have a vacancy freeze. We are not holding back on vacancies in order to deal with the financial position. But the reality is because we are struggling to recruit, that does help us provide us with bridging funding in effect to deal with the quite significant funding pressures we've got while we move towards putting significant change processes in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Suman. Eileen, did you want to come back in? Your hand? No. No. Councillor Brown? Right, Councillor Brown, then Councillor Logan.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I wanted to ask about administration costs, which are showing an overspend of 126,000, which seems quite a bit. And I note that in the notes further down, it talks about this being largely attributable to legal expenses in relation to guardianship and contested adoptions, which I think is about 70,000 of that. That still seems an awful lot of money. I just wonder if there's any background to that. That seems quite a lot of contested adoptions by the looks of it.
Councillor Brown, I'll take that one. In relation to the administration fees for adoption, we don't have a specific budget that's allocated to that, and what it does, it goes into the pot. The reason we've got so many contested, or we've got such high costs with that, is because we're actually becoming very successful at getting permanency plans for young people that are in our care, and that's because that's in their best interests. So probably a litmus test is that the more that you're actually spending on adoption fees is probably an indicator of the amount of adoptions that are actually going through, and we're seen as a good performing local authority when it comes to securing permanency for young people. So it's a measure of the success in terms of the overspend with that. We don't think it's a budget that's not in control at the moment, and actually it's the right reason to be using those costs to secure a child's future as well.
I follow that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liam. I don't see any further questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, capital budget monitoring 2023 to 24 for the period 1st of April to 28th of December 2023, and that's pages 21 to 24. And I believe Graham's speaking to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, the purpose of this report, which is on pages 21 to 24 of your papers, is to provide information on the progress of the capital programme for the same period, 1st of April to 28th of December 2023. Section 3.2 notes the budget for the resource of 2.030 million for this financial year, and there has been no change to this budget since the last report to this committee in early December. Section 5.2 notes the estimated outturn position of 2.6 million, and this is an overspend of 0.570 million on the budget. This is mainly due to the timing of spend on both the community alarms and Swiss Plus replacement projects, resulting in the budget being required in 23-24 rather than 24-25. Funding for these projects will be brought forward from next financial year. Section 5.3 notes that as at 28th of December, anticipated spend was 1.391 million, with actual spend of 1.537 million. The resource are 0.146 million ahead of programme, and this mainly reflects the timing of payments for data migration on the Swiss Plus replacement project. This position is detailed in Appendix A on page 23. Projects are progressing well, and I have no issues to highlight to committee at this stage of the financial year. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. The committee is asked to note the social work resources budget of 2.030 million, spend to 28th of December of 1.537 million, and the projected outturn for the financial year of 2.6 million. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I don't see any questions, comments. Do we agree to recommendations in the report in section 2?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Item 5 is the workforce monitoring, October to December 2023, and that's pages 25 to 32. And could I ask Eileen to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standard workforce monitoring report for social work resources covering the period October to December 2023. Section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics for committee, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the absence rate for the resource for December was 8.1% compared to a council-wide figure of 6.6%. This is increased compared to the previous month, and compared to the same period last year, the figure is increased by 0.4%. All of this information translates to a projected annual average for the resource of 7.2% compared to a council-wide figure of 5.3%. The resource managers continue to follow the maximising attendance procedures, and they work with personnel colleagues to ensure that all the supports are in place to enable employees to return to work and that the appropriate actions are taken. Section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2, and the main points are that during the period there was 344 occupational health referrals, there was 6 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances or dignity at work issues raised, there was 55 accidents or incidents recorded during the period, and there was 37 leavers that were eligible for an exit interview, and 38% of them completed exit interviews. In terms of posts that became vacant during the period, the details are in Appendix 2A, and there were 79 posts that became vacant. 75 of them will be filled. 1 was held pending a review of service, 1 removed for savings, and 2 were ended due to fixed-term contracts. And I'm referring committee back to section 2.0 and ask that the workforce monitoring information for social work resources covering the period of October to December 2023 is noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. Just at 4.1 on the resource absence figure for December was 8.1%, so that's increased again by 0.3%. Overall, in the resource, compared to the absence figure of 7.2, compared to a council-wide figure of 5.3, so it's pretty high. And although the staff are the best asset to any organisation, it's about the workload pressures that puts onto other staff, given we've already just spoken about the vacancies that are already there. We've got 8.1% of our staff off sick, so there must be pressures to the other staff in there that that are happening round about. So it's how are we dealing with that? It would also be good to see what the sickness absences trends actually are, because we know that there's 8.1%. We don't know if they're musculoskeletal, stress, whatever they are. So I think it'd be good and handy to see what the breakdown of the absence figures, to see what they look like. But it's about the support going forward, because that figure's very high. It's how we get that down a little bit, by supporting the staff to make sure they come to work and are supported at work. Now, I know there is different programmes. Are they working efficiently? Is that what we need to do? Is there anything else we need to do to try and get that figure down? Because ultimately that will help all the staff, not just the ones who are off sick, but the people who are actually struggling currently at work at the same time.
So the resource absence figure is typically a bit higher than the council-wide figure, and that's generally due to the kind of demographic of the workforce. But in addition to that, given that we're quoting December absence figures here, we do tend to see a higher absence rate in December, particularly attributed to respiratory. But I can provide a breakdown in terms of how that's recorded for the resource. Some of the detail is in the appendix, but I'm happy to provide a further breakdown if that's required. In terms of supports for employees that remain at work, we have just recently relaunched our employee assistance programme in terms of that's provided by PAM Assist, and there's a very useful employee wellbeing app. I don't know if any of you that were attending the Employee Issues Forum yesterday, there was a demonstration going over the key points in terms of how that's offered. It offers a wide range of supports which are more enhanced than was previously available. That's just one of the examples that we're continuing to look at, how we make sure that we maintain our employees' health and wellbeing. That also remains a key action of our workforce plan, to make sure, as I say, that we're looking after employees. But I take the points that you've noted, and we do continue to look at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Eileen. Councillor Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. My question relates to 4.3 on page 26, and it's the number of accidents having raised by 29 in the same period as last year. I'm just wondering, are we reporting this differently, or do we have any reason for the large increase in the number of accidents? Thanks.
Yeah, so we did see a number of an increase in the accidents that I've recorded. However, when we look, there seems to have been a bit of a reporting lag. So there was actually 27 of those accidents didn't actually take place within the period. We'll have a further look at that and look at if there was any particular areas are requiring some more additional training, just to make sure that they're reporting accidents timeously. Thanks.
Did you want to come back in, John? No.
No, that's fine. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Margaret. It was on the point about physiotherapy services. I noticed last year it was 101 and this year it's 107. It was just of interest. Our staff directed and do get training on manual handling, just to make sure that they are supporting people in the best way that's going to be safe to them and safe to the service user.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a regular programme in terms of manual handling training that's offered to all of our employees, and that includes refresher training. So it doesn't just happen once. As I say, there's quite a robust programme in place to make sure that employees do receive regular manual handling training and making sure that they're working safely. In addition to that, for employees who are unfortunately off with some sort of musculoskeletal complaint, there is an automatic referral to the physiotherapy service.
Right.
Again, that is part of our overall occupational health and employee assistance programme that is already in place. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Thanks, Eileen. I have no further questions. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 6 is the Social Work Resource Plan Quarter 2. It's progress report for 2023-2024 and it's pages 33 to 60 in your pack. And could I ask Craig to speak to the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the Quarter 2 progress report against the Social Work Resources Plan. And as has already been touched on, at 5.2, we only have one measure that's currently been reported as red, and I'll touch on that shortly. 5.3, I think, importantly lists the number of key achievements that are also being attained in the period, and there's a number of really good examples within that list. 5.4, I've provided more detail on that red measure, namely the submission of reports to the Children's Reporter. Ideally, we should have 75% of those reported in time, and overall within the period we're at 63%. We are, however, reporting some progress in that we've gone from 51% in Quarter 1 to 70% in Quarter 2. And as has been touched on earlier, some of the reasoning behind that is the number of vacancies we've got, but there's also been an increase in demand of 12%, which is noted within the report. We've also provided some additional detail in relation to the 4 amber areas where the performance is very slightly below the target, and beyond that then I would take committee members back to the recommendations as set out in paragraph 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Craig, it's just round about the percentage of reports submitted to the Children's Reporter. And if you actually look at the last 3 years, although you say Quarter 1 is improving, over the last 3 years we've declined rapidly. So in 2021 we had 88%, 22 82%, 23 77%, and then we're now at 63%. So it's not a good look, although you're saying it's looking better, it's not looked good for years actually. So we've failed for years. We may be looking better in Quarter 1, which is good. But again, that comes back to the previous points I've made before about the high levels of vacancies. I get the point that you're saying it's hard to recruit. We've got a high level of sickness at 8.1%. That must be playing into all this at the same time. So this is read this time. What can be read more the next time? I think the other thing to look at is the localities that this is. Be better to maybe look at the localities, and that'd be something that the management team will probably be better looking at than us as elected members to see what localities are actually doing better than others. The other point is round about the referrals to the Children's Reporter are not just made by social work. Do we know that other agencies and staff and other organisations or whatever are doing the same thing? Are they reporting, and are we taking those into our statistics at the same time? Because it actually might make that look better. But it is quite worrying that we are failing, and we have failed for several years.
Yeah, Chair, I'll take that, Councillor Nelson. It's unfortunate, and we wouldn't want to be seen as failing or not meeting our targets, the national targets. What we'd say is you've identified that there's been a trend where it's been declining over the years, but actually we've been hitting our targets over the past 3 years to get the 75% plus. This is probably the first year where we've actually not been hitting the target, or it looks like we'll not hit the target. The trend is going down. The trend, as you identified, is about recruitment of staff, and it's about how we prioritise work. Well, we've got a challenge in recruiting social workers for locality teams. What we have to do, where we've got some teams where it's like a 30% deficit of qualified social workers, what we have to do is we have to prioritise the public protection arrangements, and that's child protection. So child protection will always be a priority over a SCRA report, for example, and even though that's a national target, it's about how we manage that risk within localities, because we can't be hitting targets at the expense of the protection of children in the community. Within the localities, what we've said to managers is that they need to prioritise based on risk, and for SCRA reports, which look like a lower level of risk to the actual day-to-day work that's been carried out, that will go on a pending, and that will be put in abeyance until we've got workers available to complete the report for the reporter. There's been an increased trend in the number of reports from the reporter. You'll see within that we've identified it's a 10% increase from the previous year. So a 10% increase with actually less staff does create a demand upon the current workforce, and we need to make sure that we prioritise work so that they're not given everything to do. We do get referrals from other resources. These aren't all referrals that are sent by social work, so the increase is probably a demand from other resources. That would be health and education. And it reflects what the challenges are within society. We've got a financial crisis which is impacting on communities and impacting on families, and that's creating risk and creating demand. That's why we're seeing an increase there. It's not an area or a position we'd like to be in. If we were 100% staffed or closer to 100% staff, then this is a target that we would meet and we would be able to address.
Thanks, Liam. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Liam. And that makes sense, especially around about the vacancies and the recruitment. But I go back to that part about the high sickness. The high sickness affects that as well. And it's good to hear that other resources are picking up on that. That's relatively good. But again, we need to do something about the high sickness levels. High sickness levels in NHS and within social work, we need to try and look at that. 8.1% is a high level. It's putting extra demand and extra staff elsewhere, and it's having an effect. So I think we really need to look at the sickness levels. If you're working on the vacancies, that's great. We're trying to recruit there, but we definitely need to look at that 8.1%. We need to try and get that down and get staff to come to their work.
Liam, do you want to come back?
I totally agree with you, Councillor, and I suppose in terms of the Chief Social Work Officer report, which is on the agenda later on, what you'll see within that when we look at resources, we've got actually an ageing workforce, we've got a very elderly workforce, and it looks like probably a significant number of our workforce are going to retire over the next 5 to 10 years, so that probably reflects the abilities for people to maintain good, healthy lifestyles and address sickness. And what we've also got within that as well, we've got a manual workforce. So our home carers and our residential workers are hands-on carers, and they're an elderly workforce as well. That's significantly where our biggest sickness levels are. And even within localities and APT and C staff, we're still well above the council average. I accept that sickness is an area we need to look at, but in relation to trying to prioritise work for staff, what we're doing is we're trying not to overburden them with making sure that they can do everything that we have to report on as a council. And we're probably going to have to start to look at what the risk appetite would be for, are we going to have to accept that there's going to be reds and ambers within our performance so that we can maintain staff within the workforce as well. And that's a balancing act which we'll probably need to bring to committee at various times throughout the year. As Eileen said, if we can get a breakdown of what that sickness looks like, we're very confident that people are being managed well within the sickness, and that people are off for legitimate reasons. There's nobody swinging the lead here. We know that they're off for legitimate reasons. There's also a challenge in trying to get the people who are waiting for NHS Lanarkshire or NHS, any NHS wherever they stay in, to actually get treatment within the community as well, because there's a challenge in delivering treatment in the community for the workforce as well. So it's a combination of factors which we probably have to look at a real balancing act to try and make sure we support staff but also maintain performance and reporting for the council.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. It was on the health and well-being. I was just curious. The unpaid work service has continued to be impacted by non-attendance of service users. Is it a possibility, is it an ask of the committee to ask for that breakdown of non-attendance, illness, attending paid employment, or the one that I was a wee bit concerned about was a return to custody, which means they wouldn't be able to carry out any unpaid work because they would be in custody. Is it worthwhile for us, for the committee, to have that breakdown, or is that not an ask? Thanks.
Councillor Donnelly, we can actually give that breakdown and we could bring that to a future committee. What might be worthwhile, instead of that being captured within the current reporting, that we bring a specific report about unpaid work and the successes within that workforce and the outcomes, but also some of those challenges. And it would probably merit a report in its own right, as opposed to it just being lodged within a reporting framework. So with the Chair's permission, we can look to bring something in the future back to a committee.
Thanks, Liam. I think that would be really useful. Got Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I wanted to come back to the issue of the reports to the Children's Reporter. One has the sense that the Social Work Department are sort of swamped in the need for reports left, right and centre. And I wanted to ask maybe a fairly radical question as to the extent to which all these reports are actually necessary. The reason I asked that is when I was in the Parliament, we had an issue of reports going to the Children's Reporter, coming back again, nothing actually happening with them in the meantime. They ended up where they were going to end up regardless, without the reporter having taken any further action with regard to them. There was a process issue, if you like, which was a loop which was quite unnecessary. And I see that you're doing things with single assessment frameworks and with risk management of the ones that are late and so forth. But is there scope for discussion with the Reporters Department about the extent to which all these reports are necessary? If you could reduce them by, say, 10% for the sake of argument, does that add to the risk element of the thing, or does that enable you to do more to focus on the ones that really count, if I can put it that way?
Councillor, yes, I suppose what we can do is bring a report as well, because we get the data that shows the conversion rates of how many reports are completed and how many convert onto actually statutory orders. And I don't want to make a figure up at the moment, but it's not a very high conversion rate for that. That doesn't mean to say that a child or a family don't then get ongoing support, because it could be on a voluntary basis that social work or other partners would engage with that family. And we actually are in discussion with the reporter about if we can do an abridged report for those that we would see as low level, and that we would do a voluntary engagement prior to it going to a formal status. So those discussions are ongoing with the reporter, and they're very receptive to that as well, because it's in their interest, because the more reports they're requesting, the more activity they have, and that's harder for them to manage. So we can actually work together to prioritise those high-risk reports are the ones that are prioritised, then we'll do that. But we're happy to bring a bit more detail about the conversion rates as well.
That sounds potentially very, very productive. I mean, I think what I'm keen to do is to knock out unnecessary process that doesn't actually lead to any action at the end of the day from the system. Because if people are doing work that doesn't produce action, then that's something you could be spending on doing things more effectively in other realms, as it were. So I would very much welcome that report, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Liam. Thank you, Robert. Councillor Logan.
Thanks very much, Chair. What I would like to ask is, obviously we're interested in South Lanarkshire Council, that's our bread and butter, and we're obviously very interested in our staff because their health is our wealth, basically. But at a national level, we are taking a hit that's no of our making. Again, on, say, staff recruitment, etc. Now, I know, because I read the report, for the past 3 years, there has been a significant drop in people applying for nursing, for instance. And I think, if I'm right, but you could tell me, I don't know that there's a big long queue for people wishing to become, even go to university in social work. I think there's even if it's a level plateau or it's dropping, I'm not actually sure. So therefore, apart from us here trying to manage what we can manage within the reports and the different things that you give to us, and I found that all very interesting, and I agree it is, firewatch, you're managing to keep ourselves afloat by prioritising where we should go and what we should do. But is there COSLA taking any of this up to Scottish Government to say, this is becoming a crisis? Because basically, if you're not getting people getting into the system, i.e. students, to be, fully fledged, say, social workers, or even for the NHS side, nurses, then basically it's like a game of just, you move Peter to pay Paul, but then Paul needs to be paid, so you have to move Peter. It's just it's like a domino effect. That everything just keeps getting shuffled and moved around. So it's a good thing for us. As I say, our staff is who we want to be protecting, but there's a greater problem, and I don't know whether COSLA's taking it up. I don't know where it's lying, but it is lying at the heart of government as well as just us here.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Logan. So in short, yes, we are certainly as officers, both directly and through our professional networks, we are raising this through these very issues through a number of different forums nationally, both to COSLA, directed to Scottish Government and indeed other places. It's something that we discuss, for example, with the Care Inspectorate as well. What I would highlight is, and again, appreciate your points about the national picture. Locally, we do work quite hard with our local education colleges and their universities increasingly. Something that South Lanarkshire should be proud of is that when we get students on placements within our department, they tend to stay. So that's a reflection of the quality of the experience that they have and the support they get from colleagues who are already there, as well as their own commitment to a vocation and to the career. You are absolutely right, though. We have highlighted this on a number of occasions here around the fact that we do need to look at this on a national basis. We've talked before around the need for national campaigns in terms of both recruitment, but also encouraging individuals, whether it be young people or indeed people further on in their lives, to consider careers within different aspects of social work, social care, and indeed healthcare, as you've talked about there. Government have made commitments around national workforce plans. We continue to kind of, he says, being very thoughtful with his language, we continue to kind of highlight to governments and others the fact that we need to think about the population we have. In other words, be quite clear about actually how Scotland's population demographic is changing and make sure that we are being realistic around what we can expect there in terms of the numbers of people that can go into different areas of work and the different models of care we need to have in place in order to work with the people we've got. That's my roundabout way of saying that it's not just about being able to, if there's not a population there to recruit into, to attract into courses and then attract into jobs, then what we need to do is have support from elected members like yourselves at local level, but also politicians and policy makers at national level to change how we operate, both so that we can make these more attractive professions for people to enter into, picking up Councillor Nelson's point to make sure that when people come into it, they don't feel overwhelmed, that we're able to prioritise the work and things which make the most difference to people's lives, but also be building the new information around what works differently than it has in the past, and including the use of new technology where we can. These are not easy issues for us to address. Again, you'll have been, as been referred to today, we do have our social workforce plan at a local level, as well as the integrated health and social care workforce plan for Lanarkshire. And those have also been provided to government to underline the point that there's so much that we can do, but we absolutely need action at a national level to address some of the issues that you've highlighted. Thank you.
Chair, I actually had forgot to mention, and Simon said, and it's right, that for a long time in schools and various things, various different places, people, or the pupils, were not encouraged, or probably not so much encouraged, they didn't really know what was, the schools or whoever wouldn't know what was lying out there. And I know there's been a tremendous amount of work done, and it will continue, where you're encouraging younger people at a level to look at social work as a career, no necessarily, in all different aspects, caring, different things like that. And I know the academy is up and running, and I know that we're going to try and get to school fairs, or the work fairs, and various different things like that, which is great. To me, that would be long term, which is a good thing, and we just keep plugging that. But it was the short term that's the biggest worry. So there is good work going on, and I know both for the health side and yourselves to try and get people encouraged to come in, but you certainly do need more help at a national level, because that can't be a good thing for a country if for 3 years running nurses, people want to get into nursing is dropped, or social work or whatever. But I know that other things that was within our gift to do, we're doing it and doing it well, but that will be a sort of longer term, between 5 to 10 years probably you'll see a difference.
Thanks, Eileen. Just make a contribution in terms of an elected member's perspective. I know that the discussions that take place through COSLA and the discussions that took place around the budget had also obviously touched on the impact and the impact that that has on recruitment and attracting people into the profession. Also an issue is the kind of average length of time people stay in a particular job before they move on, in addition to all the other stuff that Liam has said in terms of the demographics and the age groups. But it is, I mean, it's been consistently highlighted through COSLA, through the leaders and through an elected members forum. But what I would say in relation to this is perhaps it's something really that the National Care Service should be more focused on as well. I don't know that I'm actually up to date with the stage that that's actually at. I think we're at some stage around looking at a shared responsibility, but that is certainly something that you know, the end product, if you like, in terms of what comes out of the National Care Service should take account of and make some, you know, provisions and recommendations about how we actually tackle that and tackle some of the issues that people have spoken about today. But certainly it's something that's been, you know, highlighted to the government and to the Scottish Government in numerous occasions in numerous ways. So thank you for that. I've got no further questions or comments. Do we agree to recommendations in the paper?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Item 7 is the Social Work Risk Register, update pages 61 to 72, and could I ask Craig again to speak to the paper? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, members will recognise the format in terms of our risk register report and the background provided at paragraph 3 that sets out the rationale around the approach we take. We have highlighted the revisions that have been made to the risk scoring from the last report at paragraph 4.1, and these are further detailed in Appendix 2. Just following on from the last discussion, you will see highlighted at 4.2 our areas of very high risk, which include funding, workforce, market capacity, cost of living and public protection. And like I said, I think the discussion this morning reiterates why these are all in the very high risk category and very pertinent to us at the moment. You'll see at 4.3, we've also included within the report the range of those risks that are graded slightly lower, and these are detailed in Appendix 3, whilst we've also noted at 4.6 those risks of the Council that are pertinent to social work resources as well. We've also highlighted at 4.8 the very high risks and high risks which have been managed through the IGB, and again these are those which are relevant to social work resources. And beyond that, Chair, I would take the committee back to the recommendations as set out in section 2 and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Craig. I don't see any questions or comments. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the paper? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to items for discussion. Item 8, sustaining social work, children and family services, budget recovery actions, and this is pages 73 to 84. And could I ask Liam to speak to the report? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. The purpose of the report set out in section 1. You'll see what we want to do with the committee is to provide an update on the projected overspend of 10.6 million for social work services, particularly children and families, for 2024-25. We want to also present to the committee the sustainability and values options appraisal screening tool, and I'll say more about that through the presentation. And we also want to identify a commissioning strategy for intensive family support service and a review of our current policies and procedures. Section 3 gives a background to the current challenges that we actually face, and for this report what we've identified is the Audit Scotland statement that goes out, and it actually just reiterates the challenges we're facing with financial pressures, but also how we have to do things differently. You'll see within that quote they're looking at 3 planning horizons that we need to look at. One is how we continue to deliver services in the here and now, what we need to do to make improvements in the short term, and how we actually have to radically change how we deliver services. Section 3 further goes on to sort of state some of the other challenges we've got. You'll see at 3.3 that the Chief Social Work Officer report from last year was quoted, and that's again reiterating that the increased demands that we're actually getting upon services. We've touched on some of that even with the SCRAP performance. But what we've also highlighted is that changes in legislation have had a major impact on how we actually deliver services, particularly the Children and Young People's Act and actually the continuing care legislation, which we've referenced previously at this committee as well, about how that puts a financial challenge on us. And the financial challenge is if you do your work properly and you work to the principles, there's actually a financial impact on that. You'll see at section 3.4 as well that there was a one-off 9.2 million allocated to the Children and Families budget last year. Again, that's a non-recurring option, and for those that have been about for a while, you'll see that there's always been non-recurring options that have been made to the Children and Families budget, which has been always overspent. And to be fair to the Council, they've always underwritten any overspend so that we can deliver our statutory duties. Appendix 1 within the report at 3.5 identifies what the actual budget is versus what the budget pressures are. And I suppose if you look at some of those figures, it's quite stark. So for 2024-25, we're projecting a £10 million plus overspend. That's based on the status quo arrangements that we have at the moment. Section 4 of the report gives some background to the sustainability and values options appraisal approach. Those that are familiar with Integrated Joint Board will know that this is a tool we've actually launched through the IJIB, and it's been noted by Audit Scotland as a tool that can be used to prioritise work and prioritise how you would look at reviews and savings within a budget or in managing budgets. The screening scale is basically very basic. It's a 1 to 5, which goes from benchmarking and efficiencies, which are greens, through to public protection, which are your must-dos, which are reds. And I suppose the implication is you don't touch your reds. You need to look at your greens and your ambers before you actually look at reds. And Section 4 also highlights, just reiterates some of the duties, the statutory duties that we have as a council that we need to deliver. In terms of Section 5 within the report, it looks at some of the budget recovery actions to date, and we thought it would be useful to note that none of this is done in isolation, and there's been proactive work with colleagues from housing, where we're looking at getting good housing accommodation for young people returning to South Lanarkshire, and are actually seen as a priority, and we've made good success in returning a number of young people. So even though we had like a £9 million plus overspend, actually without the success of the cooperation and the partnership with housing, that would have been significantly higher. At 5.2, you'll see that there's an interim solution that is in the revenue budget for 2024-25 for social work resources, and it's primarily that the contribution of the Strathclyde pension scheme, the employer's contributions, will be reduced over the next 2 and 3 years. And what we're looking at, there's a 7.7 million solution that can be dealt with for 2024-25 for children and family services, and it's been agreed that that will go to that budget. So that again gives a one-off solution for 24-25, but it's not sustainable going forward. In terms of Section 6, what we're highlighting, which I think is important for the report, is the budget recovery and the next steps that we're looking at. There's 6 options that we've identified there, which range from the commissioning of an intensive family support service to try and reduce budget, down to reviews of estate as well, and I'll touch on each of them individually. In relation to 6.3, you'll see that what we're looking to do is to commission an intensive family support service, which will predominantly target those young people who are in high-cost placements. And you'll see 6.3.4 and 6.3.5, some of the financial benefits we'll get from that. So a 1.2 million investment over 3 years for an intensive support programme. If we can release 15 placements, I know actually 20 over the 3 years, then we could get 3.6 million of a saving for the budget. What we're also looking to do is to review current policies and procedures, and we want to benchmark nationally about how we are with those. So you'll see 6.4, we're identifying fostering and kinship rates for continuing care, supported carer rates and adoption allowances. What we want to do is benchmark how we actually pay nationally against that and see if there's any efficiencies that can make within it. We currently pay the same rate for continuing care as we do for fostering and adoption rates, and there's not a requirement to pay the same rate. So we'll still work within the legislation, but we want to see where we are nationally and see if there's any efficiencies. What we're also looking to do is to review the transport policy for children affected by disability. We pay for all taxis and transport for children affected by disability, other than school transport. That's education that deal with that. But again, what we want to do is balance and benchmark where we are nationally with that, with other local authorities. We don't actually have a criteria that is set, so we'll be looking to review the current practice and come up with a criteria going forward, again with a view on making efficiencies within that budget. At 6.5, you'll see that we're identifying a review of 2 services. This is the first review we'll be doing of services, and there will be further services as the year goes on. But we're looking at the counselling service within social work, and we're looking at emergency social work, the out-of-hours service. We've identified these 2 services based on the sustainability and values options appraisal, because we're looking at what are the non-statutory pieces of work that we deliver. There's not a requirement to deliver counselling through social work, but we do know that counselling is a very valuable resource, so we're looking to review that service. And in relation to the emergency social work service, there's a requirement to deliver out-of-hours services that are statutory, predominantly child protection, adult protection and mental health requirements, but there's not a requirement to deliver it on a 24/7 basis as we currently deliver it. So we're looking to review that and see if there's an alternative model that we can come up with. In relation to a review of contracts, we've got a number of contracts which Children and Family Services Commission direct, and what we're looking to do is for those contracts coming to the end of contractual arrangements, we'll be looking to stop them, but for other contracts we'll be looking to see where we can get savings. And the final review we're looking at is just a review of the estate that we currently have, and what we'd be looking to do is see can we deliver the same services in less buildings and see what efficiencies we can get from that. So there's a number of reviews that are currently ongoing, and we'll bring those back to to future committees when decisions have to be made within them. In relation to employee implications, you'll see that it's the counselling service and the out-of-hours service are where we will have employee implications for these reviews, and it's 5 staff in the counselling and it's 10, just under 11 staff in ESWS. Section 8 highlights the financial implications. They are threaded throughout the report, but you'll see that the current challenge we have is we've got a projected 10.6 million overspend for 24-25, and you'll see 8.2 we've got the one-off recovery of 7.7 million which can go to the budget for this year. In relation to other implications for the council, what we're aware of, and it's been highlighted in the risk report, is that some of these areas are actually very high within our risk register currently, and it's funding and budgetary pressures, the workforce availability and capacity, which we've obviously touched on already within the report, and it's making sure that we fulfil our public protection arrangements, and they're all running at very high. So from a children and families perspective, what we need to do is look to do things differently. So if I can refer members back to the recommendations at section 2 within the report, what we're asking you to do is to note the contents of the report, to note and endorse the sustainability and values option appraisal screening tool, and what we're looking to do is to the commissioning of an intensive family support service be noted in the timescale for that, and also to note the review of the policies and procedures and the contracts currently being undertaken. So refer the committee back to the recommendations and happy to take questions.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It's quite evident that the residential placements is the biggie in this one, isn't it? With about £8 million plus out of the £10 million budget gap. And I wanted to just get a bit of a flavour of that. I mean, are we talking here about, if you like, placements because of social background? Are there issues of learning support issues or disability issues that come into this that make it more expensive? Is there a kind of mix of people that we're involving here? What sort of things are we talking about? And what sort of numbers are we talking about as well?
Councillor, thank you. In relation to the profile, it's a range of individuals in terms of residential school. It could range from young people with very complex physical needs and disabilities, and the residential school option is the only safe option for them to be cared for, and it through to young people who have problematic offending behaviour within the community. We've also got young people for their own vulnerability, and that could be subject to child sexual exploitation, that are also within residential school establishments. So it's a full range that we've got. Where it becomes a big pressure is that our actually numbers that have been accommodated hasn't increased, but the numbers remaining in care is increasing, and that's because of the Continuing Care Act. So whereas before young people would have left care around about 16, if not 18, we've got young people that are remaining in those placements, and they've got a right to up until the age of 21. So that's where we're seeing the big financial pressures. We've currently got round about 66 young people that are in residential school placements, but the profile that we had prior to the Continuing Care Act was we've been running round about 30 to 35. So what we're looking to do is try and get back down to that number of 30 to 35 young people. I'm confident and we're very secure that all those young people that are in residential placements are there because there is a need. But what we need to do is look at alternative options to try and get them safely back into their own communities or back into the family arrangement, or a cheaper option which is suitable within the community as well.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Donnelly.
Thanks, Liam, for that report. Quite worrying, some of the stuff that you've just highlighted that we're going to have to deal with come a future meeting. My wee concern is the kinship care, the fostering, and that we're not investigating to cut back and at the expense of the families that are taking on the kinship care. They do an amazing job, and I think we need to be very mindful of their financial aspect of them being able to do that job and not increase the burden that they would end up having. And also in terms of the counselling, we're obviously attached to trauma-informed training and are mindful that those children that are getting counselled will have trauma in their lives. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Donnelly. I suppose this is quite a worrying report, because if you look at just the financial pressures, it's very concerning. But I suppose I probably need to balance that and give a bit of assurance that some of our performance actually from a national perspective is very good when it comes to children and family service. And you quite rightly identified kinship care. We're actually the third best performing local authority for kinship care and kinship care numbers. And if you think if we weren't performing well with kinship care, our costs would be higher. So that's a positive thing. And in terms of payments, we pay in an equivalency for our kinship carers with foster and adoption rates. So there's no doubt about that we're paying what the correct rate is. In relation to what we need to do going forward, we will work within the legislation, but what we don't have is there's no rate that's for continuing care, which will impact on kinship carers as well as foster carers. So that's something we need to look at going forward, and we'll make sure that it's done proportionately and it doesn't disadvantage anybody going forward. I'd like to think that that will be the principles that we'll be working towards. In relation to the other point you were talking about, sorry, it was children with disability, was it, Councillor?
Trauma.
Trauma, the counselling service. So in relation to counselling, we are the only local authority in Scotland that has a counselling service attached to its social work department. Others have either never had it or they've removed it. We will look at alternatives, and what we're aware is the Scottish Government paid money towards the CAM service to increase their response and to address waiting times, and that looked at counselling as well. And we're also aware through education that they were given a lot of money to commission counselling services through education, and we've got very good counselling through our schools now as well. So we'll be looking to make sure that we can signpost young people who are experiencing trauma to an appropriate resource if we are not delivering it within social work.
Thanks, Liam. Are you okay with that, Mary? Yep.
Yeah, just pass on to Liam. I'm very impressed with the reply you gave me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Councillor Allison.
Thanks, Chair. This obviously isn't a one-off problem. It's been a number of years that there has been an overspend, hence a budget recovery plan, if you like, Liam. I think what is disappointing though is that that didn't take greater precedence through the budget process. Yes, we had discussed this and we'd identified funding, extra funding for you, but it did not fill the gap. So why has it been left to here to decide basically on a reduction in service rather than putting it through the budget process that may have identified the funds that could have covered the problem and then allow you to take on a budget recovery programme for future years? Why did that not happen? And secondly, reading your budget recovery programme, it's about finance. It doesn't mention what impact it may have on service users. And is that not an equal part of this and should be part of the decision as to whether we need to identify other funds or follow the programme that you're suggesting that looks as if it is going to reduce the service? Is that fair?
Sumit.
So thank you, Councillor Allison. So two elements, and then I'll take them in reverse order. In terms of the latter point about talking about the impact on individuals, that's why we've got a screening scale in there. So we've highlighted around how we will look at issues in terms of ensuring that we're protecting the resources for public protection and legislative obligations. And certainly as we bring forward any propositions, those will clearly articulate what the implications would be in terms of service users, staff, and indeed all others as we're progressing through that, because we're acutely aware of the impact that any of these changes can and will have in certain areas. That being said, as Liam said, there's also a number of elements within this where actually, if we would want to bring ourselves in line with practice elsewhere, or in terms of the example of the intensive family support, introduce arrangements which will actually benefit the area, the young people and the families we've got responsibilities for. In terms of your first point, though, in terms of the budget recovery arrangements and why we are where we are in terms of this, without getting into detail, obviously, of the discussions that took place at the budget signing board process, I would remind leaders that this was highlighted at the beginning of that process, certainly when I came to speak to you about a number of different pressures, and we did talk about actually the balance between actually our statutory responsibilities and indeed our commitments around public protection, and then the areas of other expenditure that we were maintaining within the service and the choices that would have to be made within that. I'm very happy to certainly pick that up as a separate conversation, and certainly that's something that I've spoken to the Chief Executive and others that we will bring forward into the next round of discussions as that we look at the budget for next year. I am also very thoughtful, though, that, again, the Council had a deficit of 20.5 million to deal with in the first instance, and while it would be very welcome for additional resources to come towards children's social work, and certainly I would not be arguing against that by any shape or form, I'm also very conscious about actually the overall pressures on the authority as a whole and how we get the right balance here. There are a range of areas that we need to be looking at, just as other resources are, and we will continue to bring that forward. But ultimately, as you're quite rightly in terms of highlighting here, the allocations to children's social work and indeed other resources is ultimately a political decision, and so those should be considered issues that should be certainly considered through the budget setting process going forward. But again, this has been well rehearsed both through this committee and indeed the exec committee and council. We've regularly highlighted the pressures within children's social work services, as you yourselves have highlighted there, and again I'm very happy to have a further conversation separate to this meeting about that.
Thanks, Suman. Just to kind of add to what Suman has said, I mean, this has been part of the whole process around the budget discussions, Alec, in relation to the deficit that we're facing. It's also part of the process in relation to the budget discussions around the integrated joint board, which are imminent, and also the decisions that we make there are going to have serious impacts. And yes, there is going to be impacts to this, because in order to fulfil statutory obligations, then you're going to have to look at other areas and how you provide the services, as Liam has outlined in the report. But this, unfortunately, as you know, Alec, is the situation that we're in. I mean, I wasn't part of the group, the partnership group, but I was part of the other discussions in relation to the budget that we eventually agreed. But you must be aware of what the impact is going to be across the authority in terms of the financial situation that we're in, and the decisions that we made in relation to the budget. So it's not really different to that in terms of that it is going to have a negative impact somewhere. But to also kind of say something positive in the context in terms of the Integrated Family Support Service, I think that's very, very innovative. I think it's going to be a good thing if we reduce the numbers of children and young people in residential placements and have them based more in the community. It's also going to be working with one of the third sector organisations as well. So it will be really interesting to get reports back to this committee to see how that's evolving and what impact that has overall in terms of children and families. So there are positive aspects to it. But no, I agree with what has been said so far. It's going to have an impact. There's nothing that we do now is not going to have an impact across a whole range of services because of the financial situation that we're in, which was well rehearsed, I'm sure, in all of the budget discussions. Unfortunately, it's the position that we're in at the moment. If you listen to all the stuff about Birmingham and other councils that that are practically going bankrupt, and it's because they have to, prioritise in terms of, what they provide, which has an impact in other areas. I don't see any more questions or comments. I just thank Liam for the report. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2? And we'll get, obviously, further reports on developments at future meetings.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 9 is the Justice Social Work Whole System Approach, Service Development and Capacity Building, and it's pages 85 to 92. And could I ask Liam to speak to that again? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on a whole systems approach within justice services. Section 3 gives a bit of background that we undertook a review of justice services in March 2023, and that was concluded in November 2023. In relation to the report, you'll see at Section 3, Section 4 and Section 5, there's 3 specific pieces of guidance and legislation that are impacting on how we need to review our services. That is in the Scottish Sentencing Council actually issued sentencing guidance in 2022. We've got the Bail and Release from Custody Act 2023, and that's referenced at Section 4. And we've got the Children Care and Justice Scotland Bill, which is referenced at Section 5, and that's due to be a bill that's due to be passed. These 3 pieces of guidance and legislation are impacting on how we deal with young people within the justice system. You'll see at Section 4 that it gives an example of the whole systems team looking at 16 to 21 years of age, and it's how that is now going to be expanded to 16 to 25 years of age. And it gives examples of how actually dealing with young people in the justice system, we need to look at more early intervention, prevention, but also diversion from custodial sentences. Section 5 just gives some background to the secure care and release from custody transitions and the Children Care Justice Bill and the impact that will have upon young people. And there's actually, we now have to be proactive that we're not looking at custody or at bail or at remand for young people. Section 6 gives an example of the peer mentor approach, which we're highlighting within the report, and how that has worked successfully in partnership with the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and the Drug Problem Solving Court, and that's seen as best practice in engaging with young people going forward. Section 7 talks about enhancing the capacity and how we're looking to create the peer mentor post and a social work assistant post, and they're highlighted at Section 8 within the report. Section 9 is the financial implications in relation to funding this. It will be funded within the existing Section 27 budget, so there's no additional costs that we're looking at, and we're looking for the post to be added to the establishment. In relation to the recommendations, refer the committee members back to Section 2 within the report, and that the contents of the report are noted. That the Justice Social Work redesign is noted as well, looking at a whole system approach, and that the posts highlighted at Section 8 within the report are approved to be added to the establishment on a 23-month basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Margaret. Just to welcome this report, Liam. I think it's a good news story, and anything we can do to reduce the young people being in custody is the best way forward. So a holistic approach that you're looking at is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure it will have major benefits to the service users and to the young people that we're trying to help go forward with. And I wish it well. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Just to echo Councillor Donnelly's comments, it's a very positive report, and we look forward to it being developed and further reports coming to the committee. I don't have any more questions. Do we agree with the recommendations in section 2 of the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to items for noting, we have the Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report 2022 to 23, pages 93 to 146, and could ask Liam again to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. The committee will be familiar with this report as it comes on an annual basis, but it's the annual Chief Social Work Officer report. Section 3 just gives a background and it reiterates that there's a statutory requirement to have a Chief Social Work Officer and that an annual report is submitted to the Chief Social Work Advisor for Scotland. The reports are submitted in the September time, so the report's now been authorised to be shared with the committee. It's a standard report, and the appendix 1 gives the actual Chief Social Work Officer report. You'll see that there are 5 sections within the report that are standard, and it's about governance and accountability. It gives details of service quality, performance and challenges. There's resources are referenced within the report, workforce, and it's looking ahead. Also within the report as well, it identifies the data in relation to the increased demands upon the service, but also the Care Inspectorate reports as well that are referenced for the year 2022-23. Within the report as well, at section 4, you'll see in terms of quality, performance and challenges, one of the things that was significant in 2022 was the inspection of adult services for the adult support and protection. And you'll see, as was previously presented at committee, that this was a positive inspection for us, and that overall we had clear strengths that outweighed any deficits within the service. You'll see within that section 4.4, and it's referenced within the report as well, is like there's a significant challenge of social work services in relation to the cost of living crisis and how that's affecting communities, families and individuals within the community. And you'll see within the data within the report as well that there's increased demands consistently across all areas of social work. In relation to the resources, and we've touched on it, the Chief Social Work Officer report also references the challenge we have with recruitment and retention of staff, and it references the older workforce that we have and how that's going to be a challenge for us going forward, and we've got a workforce plan to try and address that. But primarily what we're looking to do is to do things differently. And in section 5 within the report, in terms of looking ahead, what we're looking to see is how we can deliver services significantly different going forward. We've highlighted some areas in terms of the use of technology-enabled care, the commitment to delayed discharge and SDS, but also we've referenced the success of the Blantyre Life within the Chief Social Work Officer report. In terms of employee implications, there's none specific for the report, and financial implications are referenced within the Chief Social Work report as well. So the report's there for committee for noting and as part of the annual return for the Chief Social Work Officer. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. Thanks, Liam. Just on the Appendix 2 in the Care Inspectorate Gradings Register, Station Road and the Children's Houses is number 3 all across the board, which is adequate. What are we doing to keep an eye on that and try and get that better? And if we look at the care at home services, we know that Hamilton Home Care Service before had a bad Care Inspectorate report. So what are we doing to challenge that low score as well? It's just sitting as these adequate, but it would be good to see these better, and how we're going to achieve that.
Councillor, yes, you'll see that that's for 2022. What we can do is we've actually had inspections since then, and we've got the 6-month return that comes from the Care Inspectorate, and those grades have actually increased. For any Care Inspectorate inspection, there's an action plan that needs to be devised, and we would work jointly with the Care Inspectorate how we would see improvements with that, and we would always want to make sure that there are improvements. The biggest challenge we've got, and you're right to mention, is the care at home service, and for Hamilton and for Rutherglen we had a significant challenge a number of years ago made an improvement notice within the Hamilton service. Those services actually haven't been inspected since the COVID and the pandemic, so what we're expecting is for inspections to take place now, and that will be a test for us to see whether we have either sustained improvements or actually made better improvements going forward. But just to give assurance that any of the registered services all have improvement plans associated with them, and through the social work governance meetings that we have, we look for updates for all those services and the staff to make sure that we're meeting the minimum requirements, but also that we've got improvements that we're driving for.
Thank you. Thanks, Liam. Just on you say that it looks like we'll probably get an inspection soon. I take it the committee will be at the forefront of any recommendations or outcomes from that. So it'd be good to see or hear when that happens. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And could I just thank Liam for the report? It's an extremely comprehensive yet concise overview of a whole range of services and outlining the positives and also the challenge that we face. And I think for anyone, interested in social work and the service we provide, it'd be very helpful for them to read this. So thank you for that, Liam. Do we agree to the annual report to recommendations in section 2? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 11, Family Support Strategy, Family Support Hubs, and it's pages 147 to 162. And it's over to you again, Liam. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. The report in front of you is for the committee, and it's an update on the Family Support Strategy and the Family Support Hubs. You'll see within the report at section 3 that an executive committee report titled Family Support Strategy and Whole Family Wellbeing Funding was presented and endorsed at the committee in March 2023. So this is an annual report to give an update in relation to that. I'd probably want to say to the committee, this is quite a good news story for us because we're actually making really good progress when it comes to delivering family support and hubs across the service. Within section 4, you'll see that the family support hubs, we've now got a hub established in every local or every locality within South Lanarkshire, and it's actually a base and it's a multi-agency delivery within that, and it deals with young people and families from age 0 to 18. One of the principles of delivering family support within the community was to actually support the hashtag Keep the Promise for 2021 to 2024, and that's delivering care at the right time, at the right in the right place, and proportionate to what families need. So the family support hubs are delivering that, and they're well used within the community. In relation to the impact, you'll see we've referenced it section 5, but it's also within the report at the appendix, that one of the principles we wanted to look at was how we would support localities and try and deal with some of the demands upon localities and divert some of that activity. And we've actually diverted a significant number of activity within the localities, which has now been picked up by the family support hubs. And the advantage of that is because it's in a multi-agency way where we've got health, social work, we've got third sector providers that are supporting us. It's less stigmatising for families to receive their support that way, and what they do is they're engaging with any of those support plans. So we're actually supporting by diverting work from the localities, and we're supporting that within the hubs, or the families within the hubs. You'll see as well, section 5 as well, we've given examples of where the family support hubs are dealing with families that are vulnerable pregnant either drug users or vulnerable families that are during pregnancy, and we've managed to successfully divert a number of those families from being accommodated and actually supporting them within the community. And we can do that as well through, we've commissioned family group decision making with Children First, and that's become a real success, and we're looking to see if we can get that rolled out going forward as well. In relation to one of the successes as well, we're looking at parenting support and group work within the family support hubs, and we are doing this on evidence-based programmes. It's just groups for the sake of groups, it's actually outcomes. And we're able to support families at source and within their own communities, so that's proven to be a success as well. You'll see within the financial implications that we received 1.8 million from the Scottish Government to deliver whole family wellbeing support, and that funding has been guaranteed until March 2026. what we need to do. So whilst that's very welcome and it's helped us to start the hubs, we probably need to look at what an exit strategy will look like. We've seen the success of the hubs, so we'll probably need to look at how we actually use our current resources to make sure that that's maintained going forward. The appendix is attached, which gives a narrative of some of the success, and it gives data of the success within that as well, and we'll bring an annual report to the committee to show that. We have to report to the Scottish Government as well annually, but what they look for is more data and how we spent the finance. They don't look for a narrative, but we've sent them the narrative of success, and what they're doing is they're using us now as one of the test areas to see about how the whole family wellbeing fund has been used and how it should be used nationally. So it's a report for noting for the committee, but hopefully it's identify some of the good outcomes that we've been able to achieve through the family support strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. I think it's an excellent example of how impactful sort of early intervention with families can be, and I think that's something that would benefit from kind of longer term planning, particularly in financial terms, in order that it can be embedded into the other developments such as intensive family support and all of that in terms of a whole systems approach. I've got Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's, I agree with your comments. I think it's always good to welcome good news, Liam. We're always good at picking up when things go bad, but I think this is good for our communities, and the feedback I'm getting from families who are using the family support hubs, that they're going well and they're welcome. So great piece of work. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Donnelly.
I also would like to welcome the report. I don't think you can do enough work around children and give support to families who have got it, you know, as a struggle. If there is difficulties within that, to keep them connected and keep them working together, and all the support we can provide is definitely meaningful and definitely worthwhile. And I really appreciate the values of this report and the support hub. Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, May. Yep, and hopefully, given the positivity of the evaluation, there will be further funding forthcoming from the Scottish Government. I don't have any more questions or comments, so thank you for that. Do you agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 12, notification of contracts awarded April to September 2023, and that's pages 163 to 166. And could I ask Suman to speak to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So committee will be familiar with this in terms of a routine report, which provides notification in line with standing orders and contracts awarded by Social Resources Committee during the period 1st April 2023 to 30th September 2023. As set out within Appendix 1. To specifically highlight, given the conversation we've already had today, you'll note the ones I would bring your attention to are actually the latter two. Firstly, in terms of agency support for social workers, and that very much speaks to Councillor Nelson's points earlier on here. I should underline this is to do with vacancies, so that's not related to sickness and absence. I mean, that's primarily vacancies. We don't do that lightly, not least because of the cost in respect of it, but that underlines the importance we attach to ensuring we've got sufficient capacity to deal with our public protection responsibilities. But absolutely, that is not a position that's sustainable or indeed preferable from us, which speaks to the redesign work that committees approved previously and has been taken forward through each one of our fieldwork teams. The other element you would note above that in terms of the large-scale investigation ties into the market provider capacity, very high risk that Craig spoke to earlier on as well. And that really makes the point that over and above the demands that we know about that we're dealing with, increasingly we're operating within a very turbulent set of operating environments where we have unanticipated pressures that come on top of our staff, that we have an obligation to contribute to alongside the Care Inspectorate at a considerable level of demand upon us and upon our services and our staff that require quite a lot of input. And so on this occasion, we had to secure external support to provide us to discharge those responsibilities. We did that effectively, but at some cost. And noting that there have been discussions with the Care Inspectorate about whether there needs to be a national discussion about how local areas, not just ours, can recoup some of those costs when we have no choice but to contribute to those processes. But happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Suman. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question with a bit of clarification. There's 2 contracts to include them for 100,000. What actual service is that for? Sorry.
I'll take that, Councillor. I think it actually should only be in one contract that's reported there because it's the same contract. We were successful in putting a bid in to the Scottish Government for funding to look at contextual safeguarding. So one of the partners was Includum, one of the partners was the University at the West of Scotland, and it's providing a part-time team leader for us. That was reported at the last committee. And it's an 18-month contract, and we will then be reporting in 18 months back to the Scottish Government and back to the committee the success of that.
Chair, supplementary. In the bottom of that, the Randstad Solutions, 132,000 for a social care agency worker and then 68,000. Is that for one worker?
I haven't got the exact details there, Councillor. We can certainly forward them to you, but the team's employed 2 or 3 workers over the time period to support the workload, as Suman's already outlined.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any further questions. Do we agree to recommendations 2 in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. I don't have any items of urgent business, but I do have a nice sort of announcement that Suman has asked me to make, and that's to congratulate Liam for becoming a grandfather. Is it a granddaughter, Liam? Yeah. Well, on behalf of the committee, congratulations, and hopefully won't be losing you to childmind and babysitting. No, congratulations, Liam. And with that, I just thank everyone for their attendance and the officers for the excellent reports and contributions from everyone as usual. And thank you. Have a nice day.